Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad Podcast with your fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nuggets to help you on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the Fatherhood Authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Welcome to I Am Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell. Thank you for joining us another Sunday morning for a great conversation. I appreciate each and every last one of you for downloading I Am Dad Podcast. I'm sure you guys saw a few weeks ago, we finally got over 2,000 downloads in 7 months. That's a lot of downloads, and our numbers steadily are going up, meaning our average number of downloads a day continue to rise and more people are catching on. The interesting thing though, no one leaves any comments. What's up, y'all? Put some comments. Let me know what you're thinking. I see the downloads, but I want to see the comments so I can see what you're thinking. But everyone that I speak to that have listened to any of the podcasts have enjoyed each and every one of you. And I'm always trying to bring stories to the conversation. We want to be serious about the content, but I think that stories resonate with people. And so where we can bring the stories of people around the issues of responsible fatherhood and daddying and parenting and relationships and all of those things to entertain you as well as inform you, I think that's the best formula for us all. And my guest today is no exception, and someone that I call on often to help me in this conversation. I've been dying to get him on, just been kind of like spinning like we all do. And many of you know him. If you've seen me, you've seen him. If you've seen him, you've seen me, Mr. Patrick Patterson. He is the president of Global Partners for Fathers and Families Consulting, LLC, which is a national consulting firm that equips schools, hospitals, Head Starts, Healthy Starts, public and private sector agencies with the tools to authentically serve fathers, men, boys, and their families. Patrick has launched and managed community, statewide, and national fatherhood programs during his 20-year career, including serving as the contract manager for the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse during Presidents George W. Bush's, President Barack H. Obama's, President Donald J. Trump's, and President Joseph R. Biden administration. As an expert working with fathers, men, and boys, Patrick has been featured as a keynote speaker, a workshop leader, and trainer in 46 states, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and seven different countries. And we're going to talk about those in a little while. He's married to his high school sweetheart, Sharani Ashford Patterson, and they have two beautiful daughters, Peyton, who's 16, and Lauren, who's 14, who are growing up quickly before my eyes. I still have pictures of them as little girls with my little girl at the same time. Yeah. And they have both co-authored 2 children's books entitled I Love When Daddy Reads to Me and Unplugged, a day of family fun without devices, which are sold on Walmart, Target, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Books A Million websites. He has his Bachelor of Social Work degree from Benedict College, which is an HBCU, and a dual master's degree in Social Work and Public Health from the USC, University of South Carolina. What's going on, my brother?
What's up, KB? You read the church rendition of my pocket, brother.
I didn't read it like the church, though.
Yeah, did my mother send you that? That's like the whole. Oh, you need nothing but social. You got everything, brother.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the introduction. I've learned that the introduction's got to hype everybody up, and then the performance is what takes them over the top. Yeah. But you don't want to leave no information, untold. It's funny because when people read my bio, like they'll say, "Give me a short," and depending on when they ask me, I'll send them whatever I got. I'm like, listen, you cut it down to 50 words or 100 words. I ain't got time for all that. And then I'll get there and they'll read read the whole thing, and I'm like, you really didn't have to do that.
Right.
You could have just said, hey, this is Kenneth Braswell, and I'm done. Yeah. And so, but man, it's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I wanted you to actually be my first guest, but we just kind of this thing just took off, and it continues to take off. And I'm sure I'm going to have you back on because there's so many different conversations. You and I have experienced this work of responsible fatherhood and fatherhood like no other person in my life. Like the things that you and I have shared is unique, to you and I, and will never be the same with anybody else.
Yeah.
I continue to believe, that you and I are stewards of this work. We have been stewards of this work, that we are architects of this work. And then the same time that we're architects of this work, we're also visionaries of this work.
Yeah.
And Patrick and I, we don't try to run sprints. We're marathon runners.
Yeah.
We just keep our heads down, not try to get caught up in what's going on out there in the country, just continue to steadily move forward.
Yeah.
How you been and how are you?
Man, I'm good. To be honest with you, man, this is a period of I'm 48 now. And like you said, I've seen a lot of things, man, but it's kind of like, I would have wanted you to read my whole bio 15 years ago, but now I'm good just being Sharani's husband and Peyton and Lauren's dad, man. Mm-hmm. Financially, I'm probably better than I ever been. Emotionally, I think I'm stronger in some areas and weaker in others. Mm-hmm. And then professionally, man, I cannot say anything, and I'm sure you'll allow me to say this, but God has been good to me. I've been around this work for a long time, and I've never applied for any job that it's 20 plus years. I've never application submit, oh, please, I hope they call me. And I just think about where my journey started and where I am today, man. The word that I use a lot lately is just grateful. I'm just grateful, man. My wife is amazing. My kids are good. One is going to college. Mm-hmm. We'll get into that, I'm sure. But it makes my heart flutter, man, because it's like you said, we were in New York and Zinga was 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade.
Yeah, she was young. She was in middle school, I believe she was in.
Yeah. And they were babies. So the older I get, man, the more I'm appreciating the opportunity just to reflect and be grateful. Be grateful. So I'm good.
Okay, cool. So one of the things that we do, I just started this some months ago, and it's been incredible just allowing people to do this because it sets the tone for the conversation. And I start off all my interviews, and I know your story, but we just want to start here anyway.
Let's go.
What's your daddy's story?
Oh, man. You've heard it. So you can mute or fix you a sandwich while I share this piece. But my father, I'll start by saying my father still is one of my greatest influences. I call him my hero. I grew up in a pretty regular community in South Carolina. It was the projects, but my dad was one of the few guys that was in the neighborhood. And my dad's name is Pat. My name is Patrick. My dad was not a very, vocal man, but you've met him. He had a presence. He wasn't large. He just had a presence about him. And so as a boy, everything that my dad did, I wanted to do. I've told people I'm right-handed. My dad is left-handed, was left-handed. I wanted to be left-handed so bad. So as I think about what he meant to me and my siblings, my dad was a perfect guy to me. And then probably 14 or 15 is when things changed for me. My dad was a pretty straight-laced guy during my childhood, but previous to me being born, he did all the stuff that we don't like to talk about, from incarceration to using to drinking. And as a boy, man, my dad was solid. I didn't know that guy. I didn't know the drinker. I didn't know the alcohol. I didn't know the guy that used. And probably around 14 to 15, my dad had a major issue where I'm going to say relapse. And the guy that I knew growing up who taught me how to fight, taught me how to run a football, made sure I had a haircut every week. made sure my brothers and I shined our shoes for church. People don't do that no more, but shining our shoes for church. The guy that literally taught me how to be a respectable young man at about 15, actually, he went backwards. You know, he had an event where he went to at his job, was being celebrated. We had just moved from the projects to the other side of town, on the other side of the tracks. My father was 3-job type of guy during my childhood. Never seen him like people say go to sleep. I never saw him sleep. I saw him take naps, but never sleep. And I'll never forget KB, when he finally got this one job that took us from the projects to this house, just how proud my family was. Nobody in my family had lived outside of like poverty-stricken areas. So we finally moved to a place called Bonneville Estates. I mean,
to the estates.
You hear me? You hear me? To the estates.
To the estates.
To the estates. But he was a grinder. My dad didn't finish 8th grade. But if you asked him a question, if he didn't know the answer, which most times he did, he found the answer. Wasn't a very like rah guy, but if he said something, he meant it. So that's what I knew about my father. That's what I knew about my father. And for me and my brothers and my sister, work was priority. Work was what he taught us. So I'm very proud, and we'll probably get into it, but proud to say that foundation kind of rivals the second half of our time together, when he was an alcoholic, when he was on the street corner, when he was going in and out of, and during my, teenage to young adult years, going in and out of incarceration. Those are some tough years, man. Those are some tough years for me because I knew the first guy. And so I'll never forget, the number of times that I'd be going to either practice or intern when I got to college, or my first job, seeing this guy that looked like my father, but I said, that's not my dad. That's not my dad. So he inspired me. One way he inspired me, I'll stop here, is I said to myself, because I knew how it felt when he left, I said to myself, if I ever had kids, I'm never going to leave. Because I knew the feeling. I saw my mom make it okay. She found a place for us to stay here. We stayed at my aunt's house, my grandma's house, shelter here and there. My mom did all of that kind of stuff to make sure we were good. But for the most part, my father had his own story. And nobody really cared to hear his story. And as a father now, I think about what he must have gone through in those moments where he was seen drunk or seen not as Pat, but the guy on the street. That must have been a lot, for him to manage, because people knew my dad. Straight up. My dad was a pretty well-known cat in the community, but that's a part of it. I'll probably share more, I'm sure, as we go through it, but that's the foundation that started me in this work. Was I wanted to make sure that men that I met knew that they mattered. And I think for my father, nobody really said to him that he mattered. When he was going through, nobody stopped to say, hey, man, you started with, how you doing? I'm sure nobody asked my father, how you doing?
How much of him is in you?
Oh, it's a lot, man. My mom talks about it all the time. His determination to get things done is 100% me. One quick story, when my wife and I were pregnant with our first, we were in Delaware, and Sharani said to me she did not want to have our child be raised in an apartment. We lived in an apartment. So I will never forget, didn't have the money, but begged and borrowed and got the money up to get a townhouse. And the closing happened faster than I thought it would. And I'll never forget, I had a blue Ford Expedition, and we had 3 bedrooms in this apartment. We moved to a house that had, it's a townhouse, but it's multiple rooms. And nobody that I knew in Delaware, because we were new to Delaware, had time to help me. So I moved an entire apartment into this house by myself. That's something my dad would have done. Part ego, part pride, not wanting to ask for help. I'd asked a couple people and they were like, I'm out. You know how I'm built. And I told my wife, I said, we are going to be in this house. So days later, after we got into the house, our first was born. So that is who I am. Loyal. My dad was very loyal, even after he kind of ended the run of using and being in the streets. The guys that he grew up with, the guys he served time with, he was still pretty loyal to those guys. And you and I work together. It doesn't matter. Loyal to a fault is what I am. So I think most of what you see every day, KB, is my father.
Yeah. So for those who don't really kind of like, know us, I have described, even when I've spoken about you, when you were on and around, I've always tell people that Patrick and I was led into our friendship.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like, somebody said, oh, I got this dude I need you to meet, or we weren't at the club somewhere, or we didn't grow up with each other. I think our destinies were led to each other. I know I've seen Patrick before this particular moment, but the moment that stands out the most, for me, is when I saw you in San Francisco or LA or wherever we was at that conference. And I was sitting out in the vestibule area between workshops or whatever. And Patrick didn't know at the time, I was there on a borrowed dime, bro. I got there. I ain't have no money. I ain't had nothing to eat. I was just waiting for the buffet lunch. I couldn't go nowhere. I didn't even know how I was going to get home. Our good friend, Donna Linda, actually paid for me to go to that conference. Yeah. And I had just literally quit my job. I think I quit my job probably a couple of weeks before then, when I was doing the work with the state of New York. And God kind of led me to get back to Fathers Incorporated with not a real plan, or I didn't walk out of there with a real plan. And on top of that, I had just got married probably about 3 or 4 months before that. I quit my job. And Patrick just came up to me and said, "Hey, yo, what's up, man? It's Kenny, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, we're chopping it up." And he said, "You just left." He's like, "What are you getting ready to do?" And I was like, "I don't even know, bro. I'm just here trying to figure it out." And he says, "Everybody thinks you're going to the feds, but my people want to talk to you." And I'm like, "Who are your people?" And he was like, "My people sent me specifically here to look for you." Yep. And our friendship, and I won't go deep into where that has led us. Yeah. But obviously it has led us to where we are. Yeah. And so I never despise small beginnings in terms of how and why God put people in my path, and the reason that they put me in my path. But I want you to talk a little bit about, because you've shared with me, and I know your entry point into this work as well. Talk to me about what led you into this fatherhood work.
It's an awesome short story, but I'll tell you like the details of it. But I grew up in a community where my dad was during all this time. So the first job I had was sparked by a paper that I wrote when I was in undergrad at Benedict College in Columbia. And it was the difference between successful and non-successful at-risk students. Mm-hmm. And the research that I found, this is limited research. This is not Pew. This is undergraduate turn in the paper research. It said that, and of course, and I can't go without saying this, but ironically, man, most of the assignments that I got in college where they said you can write about anything you want to write about. This before fatherhood was what it is. I wrote about my dad. Mm-hmm. It was never, I still have writings, but I've written about my dad over and over again. And this research was indirectly tied to this because the result of the research was I was considered at risk. The difference was a positive male figure in your life. So the paper that I wrote I got good marks on it. People saw the personal story in it. I told my story in the paper, and it landed in the hands of somebody who was running a foundation that was about to start a fatherhood program. And I was prepared to go to graduate school. I had enrolled at USC for graduate school, and this guy was just now about to start a contract with USC.
Mm-hmm.
So who's Patrick Patterson? I'm 22, 21. Who's Patrick Patterson? We're about to do this fatherhood thing. This paper speaks to what we're trying to do. Long story short, the guy and I meet, he runs a $85 million organization in my neighborhood, which I had walked past, I had driven past, I rode my bike past it. I never saw the building because it didn't stand out. He said to me, we're about to start this program and we'd love to have you be an intern while you're in graduate school. And I'm thinking, I'm not a father. Like the natural question that most people who are about to jump into something that is obviously God's hand, you ask, why me? I said, I'm not a father. And the guy said, but you understand the issue of father absence. You don't have to be told what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So I sat back, relaxed a little bit. By this time I was in graduate school, my first year, and I had about $75,000 worth of debt on the way.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy says to me, if you intern with us, we'll find a way to take care of that for you. So being the smart man that I am, in all seriousness, I was afraid because the issue was so personal. And talking about my dad today, I could do better, but then it was still raw. It was raw. So I would very rarely get in front of people and talk about him without, you hear my voice change, you hear my breathing change, because I was still hurting. In that same neighborhood where I was doing this internship, my dad was still running those same streets. So it was nothing for me to leave work or my internship and downtown and riding down the street at 9:00 at night and to see a guy stumbling. It'd be my father.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So I tried to, in many ways, I think make him proud and also kind of dispel, I'm going to do better. So I was straight laced in college, man. I didn't drink at all. My roommate, God bless him, I won't say his name. He sold the most marijuana I've ever seen when I was in college. And I never was tempted by it.
Mm-hmm.
So as I've gotten older, that's a result of my father.
Mm-hmm.
It channeled something in me, right? So I didn't veer. So when I finally got comfortable, and you were responsible for some of this, KB, I'll tell you the moment that it happened. But I was happy just kind of being in the background, seeing it happen. But I was always very shy about my story because I was a little bit embarrassed.
Mm-hmm.
It hurt me, but I was also embarrassed because it's like, wow, what a guy.
Mm-hmm.
What a guy. And nobody's checking on him.
Mm-hmm.
But finished my internship. The guy did what he said. When I finished graduate school and undergrad, when they was talking about student loan payoffs, man, I ain't got nothing for you. I have nothing to talk about, right? Mm-hmm. So in the middle of all of this, if you're hearing some of the journey for me, God has been controlling my movements throughout. And I was the first employee at this organization to run the statewide fatherhood program in South Carolina. I was not a father, but I got more comfortable embracing this is not mine.
Wow.
This is God's. And the story takes off from there. It's a pretty amazing journey, man. But I was funding programs. I was doing training, and then every now and then people who would see me in these suits and they'd ask me, so same thing you said, talk about your dad. I said, no. This is not about me, guys. It's not about, this is the blinders, right? This is not about me, guys. And I got to a place where I said, let me just own this. And the more I told my story, and I say this honestly, the more I started healing.
Mm-hmm.
I was hiding for a while, man. I was very ashamed. I was so hurt. And my wife, I give a lot of credit. Sharani was very helpful to me because there were days when I was in graduate school, my dad would call my answer machine and he would say, "Hey, boy," because he would be drunk for a while,
Right.
whatever, and then he'd be sober for periods.
Mm-hmm.
And he always had my number. He'd always find me at an internship. He'd always find me when we moved to our first apartment. My dad could find me. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't see that he was still trying to stay connected to me. Mm-hmm. And the older I got and the more I had mentors and my wife, like I said, just kind of saying, "Man, call your dad."
Right.
Call your dad. So I don't come from this in a very academic space. I mean, like the journey for me has been healing for me as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think that most of the folks in our circle got here the same way. Like the thing I love about our circle is, that in the midst of our friendships forming, that we have had a level of I labor sometimes about like not having quote unquote friends, right? And so, I remember saying to Tracy a few weeks ago, we were talking about something and I said, that my phone doesn't ring during the weekend. Like it doesn't, like nobody calls and say, "Yo, what's you doing? Let's go out and have a drink." And 90% of my conversations are work driven. Like if I wasn't involved in the work that I'm in, I would not have these conversations. And I said, and I don't know how I feel about that sometimes in my relationship, because I question my relationships. I question whether or not they will live past my value in this space and in the work that I do. I remember, Patrick, when I did the documentary Spit and Anger, one of the things that I said to Jenks, to what you just said, is I want to tell the story, but I don't want to be the story. Mm-hmm. Yep. Right. And there's these things that you and I sacrifice based on what we went through with the relationship or in the relationship with our own dads, and how we have tried to right that ship in relationship with our own children. Yeah. And then how we've tried to take all of that information and navigate what we're now doing with fathers. And what I want to ask you is, I often talk about triggers and things that trigger me in this work, because there are these times where something will either trigger some mental area of trauma that is connected to me and my father, or it'll trigger some mental area of trauma that's connected with me and more specifically my first child. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe even my children now, these moments where I was to ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, how would they rate me as a dad? They might give me a 2, mm-hmm. right? Those times scare the hell out of me. Mm-hmm. As a dad doing this work, how often do your own relationship with your father and your role as being a father mm-hmm. Is triggered within the work that you do?
Man, that was a good question. I would say, and this is my scoring sheet, my kids, they really think highly of me. And so much so that I've had to get comfortable with how they appreciate me. Because it's interesting because most guys crave it, but when we get it, we don't know what to do with it. But since I've been doing this work, I have been traveling. And to this day, I get a warm reception. It's less of the running to the door, but it's daddy's home. Let's go get something to eat. Or my kids appreciate me. My wife appreciates me. And the way that I embrace it now is different than I was when I was younger, because I always felt like I need to do something else. I need to do more. I need to get us in this house, I need to make sure they get in the best school, and I never gave myself credit. So even now, I never call myself Mr. Fatherhood, but people have given me that title. And I'm at a place now in my life where I accept God's anointing. I accept that I've been blessed throughout, but for many years, man, I have always been, for whatever reason, put in the front. And I've never asked to be in the front. When I played sports in high school, I was a captain. You know, when I've been in meetings, they've asked me to, do you mind speaking? And the true essence of who I am clearly an introvert that is okay being extrovert, if that makes any sense.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So my kids and managing what we talk about every day and how it works here, I now accept the fact that I'm doing the very best I can and that they appreciate it. And I have a hard time taking in accolades. And I'm sure it's tied to like my childhood because I was raised as a giver through church. My dad was a giver. He would have given his last thing off his back, shirt off his back, anybody. But I don't struggle with it as much as I used to. But I used to struggle with it a lot because I felt like I need to do more. But my kids were like, Dad, this is great. My wife is like, thank you. I'm like, should have got them 2 pairs of shoes.
Right.
Now I'm better. I also have had to learn how to rest, you know, as a father, because I can say this is my dad. My dad did not get up with the sun. He got up before the sun. Mm-hmm. And so as a young man, you didn't catch me in the bed on Saturdays. Mm-hmm. And some of that runs you into a wall at a certain point, particularly with the pace of how we're doing things. But I always felt like I need to be up first. I need to go to bed last. And that's how I was raised. But I think at this point in my life, KB, as a dad, I feel there's always room for improvement. I feel proud of myself. My kids are great kids. They're normal teenage girls, but academically they're good. They've got their own businesses. They're respectful. I said grateful in the beginning. I'm grateful to where I am now. Grateful to where I am now.
Do you ever give thought to how your work and your storyline impacts those who like know you from way back when and are watching you kind of reconcile your relationship and your story and living in your story, but they still haven't resolved the issues that the same principles? And I'm thinking about your brothers, right? And I'm thinking about your sister. And I'm also thinking about your mom, who are watching you like take this relationship that you had that wasn't the best relationship and have taken all of your academic learning and your life experiences and turned this thing, as God would lead you to turn it into, the thing that drives your life. And as you're reconciling it, do you ever give any thought as to how they're interpreting what you're doing and whether or not they're okay with it?
I think they're okay with it. My family, I'm the third of 4, and again, I'm an introvert, honestly. I don't do well with a lot of accolades, but my family, when I come home, bro, they all at my mama's house. How was DC? How was Delaware? How was Philly? You know, how was South Dakota? And there's a piece of me that would hold some of that back because I felt, you know, like, why me? That was early on. Now I share it. They come up and we talk, but they're very proud of me, man. They knew my dad and our relationship, and they knew, I think, better than I knew. My older 2 siblings were out of the house, so they kind of had that formative years with him. But I was 15. And it did me no greater joy than to hear my dad say, man, good job, or I'm proud of you. So that left when I was 15. So there was a period where I was kind of like, where is that voice? So when my dad and I reconciled, and I would go and Jamie, my younger brother, both of us kind of have a similar story. When I would go and pick him up or get him a haircut, or when I'm speaking, anywhere I speak, I don't ever not talk about my father. I think they're proud of that because there are their own opinions of him, but the way that I've embraced what he's done for me, I think they're all proud of it. My mom is very proud of it. I mean, anything that I have done in Columbia or surrounding areas, my family shows up, particularly on the fatherhood tip. They show up in big numbers. And I think it's because I have taken what could have broken me, actually, and I've used it for good, not just for me, my family. So I don't think it's a bad thing, but I've struggled over the years with being celebrated because I have always wanted to just be in the back. I'm better now, but that was a hard thing. When I moved to Delaware, I was working in Philadelphia. I was very concerned about my mom because my dad was still kind of in and out of his, situation. And he never physically harmed her that I saw, but he was always making threats, But I'll never forget when I left and came back and got a chance to see him like as a man. And my father and I had a conversation. I've shared this before, but when he said to me, son, I'm sorry. I mean, it changed everything for me. And I need
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
And I needed it. I was just going to say, I think for me, my accolades in college, I was a poor high school student, but a stellar college student. And I think I was trying to prove something. When I got to my first job, I was trying to prove something. And I think a lot of people who miss that piece, whether it's a mom or dad, they have their own kind of engineering, how they're wired. And for me, it was, oh, no. I will not be like that.
Yeah. Well, you are a honorable and admired person for your authenticity. That's why I love you so much. You are who you are. There's nothing fake about Patrick Patterson. Like when he shows up, that's Patrick Patterson with all what you may think are his strengths or maybe you think is weaknesses. You are, who you are. And I love that you show up that way because you are a mirror for my life in a way that in many ways you're contrasting to me, right? And so I remember having a conversation, I think it was with Shawnee. I think me and Shawnee was talking about you one day and I said, I said, there is one thing that I'm extremely envious of Patrick about. And she was like, what is it? Like, what is it? I said, everybody likes him. Everybody likes him. And then I said, and she was like, so what do you, and I was like nobody, and I said this right out of my mouth. I said, nobody likes me. I said, everybody likes him, but nobody likes me. She goes, that's not true. Yeah. She said, the way that people see you guys are different. And she says, you actually complement each other. Yeah. To really double up. And people are like, if it's like mommy and daddy, right? Yeah. Do I want to go to mommy and get the soft and I want to avoid dad, or do I want to go to dad and get the truth and avoid mom because she's gonna make me feel bad if I disappoint her? And your relationship just works that way. Yeah. And it's so funny because I now filter all of our mutual friendships through that lens. Yeah. And it's kind of like, okay, but between the two of us, they just get to choose which one they're more comfortable with. Yeah. But what they do also know is not to mess with either of us. Right. Correct. You just don't know, the depth of, our relationship just goes into spaces. And we often talk about, and you brought this up earlier, Patrick and I are going to Africa this year. I know, he has wanted to go to Africa. I've been to Africa a few times and out of all the experiences that we've shared, I can't freaking wait to share this experience with you in Africa. But we have traveled before. We've traveled a lot. Our stories are endless in terms of, Patrick and I tell these stories about, when we first got into this work, when the money was funny, but we weren't laughing.
Yeah. I remember checking in the hotels and asking people to back up, yo. I mean, because and before I had an app to check my account, the last time I saw my account was when I, was at the ATM and it said $300. Now, why the bank waits until I'm about to make a transaction to debit that money out, I don't know. But you get to the counter and they're like, yo, you need to do incidentals. It's $50 a day for the $5. It's like, hold up, man. I promise I'm not going to touch the water, the nuts. I ain't touching nothing. So that was those were called the lean years.
The lean years. You was dreading that, and this is what you didn't want to hear. Maybe you might want to try another card.
Yeah. I got one card, ma'am. And I speak tomorrow. So
and then, we also had the pleasure of going to Mongolia, which was an experience beyond experiences.
Yeah.
And even there, we share these moments of walking down the street and because we were the only two black spots there until we ran into that dude in the building.
DJ.
Yeah. And he turned around and said, wait, whoa.
Yo!
We saw a girl get hit, literally on the floor. Remember that? Saw the girl get hit. People was touching us and looking at us as we was walking down the street.
Yep.
All kinds of crazy things. But the most comical of that particular trip was when we was coming home and we was in Beijing.
Yes.
And we're in the Beijing airport. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning. These cabs are trying to take us to hotels in the Beijing.
$25 a night. Yeah. I'm like, I've never been to Beijing. Kenny's like, do you know anybody in Beijing? I'm like, oh, but it's $25 a night. Now my card could embrace that expense that night. Kenny's like, I ain't going nowhere. I said, well, now that you said I don't know, he said, you speak the language? I'm like, these are some good points. So if I remember correctly, KB, we sat at a corner.
Yes,
back to back. And we, Cagney and Lacey, you know what I mean? We slept like this, and I'll never forget waking up, and you weren't on my back. You were walking the airport, I think.
Right.
It was like 4 a.m, 5 a.m, but...
Yeah. Well, man, that was some comical times. And there's but the cool thing about all of those encounters is that we always, as much as we love doing the work, we also love just being together. We also have other brothers that are in the circle that are part of this conversation.
Yeah.
But what I've appreciated about Patrick over the years, and David and Eugene and others that were part of this particular circle, is the level of accountability that we held each other to as it relates to standards and who we were. Mm-hmm. Like I can remember being at tables, and how dudes get when they after the conference is over, and then nighttime rolls around, they want to go do some things, and me and Patrick, they like, what y'all gonna do? Me and Patrick like, I'm going to my room. Patrick I'm getting ready to go call Sharani and the girls. I'm getting ready to go watch Our Couple and Martin.
NBA basketball.
Yeah. I ain't wherever y'all going. Y'all have a good time. I see y'all in the morning. Yeah. And we're not going. But tell me what one of the things that I have the pleasure of doing is taking my then 16-year-old daughter to Africa with me, and it changed her life. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that once you go this first time, that the next agenda on your mind is going to be to take your family with you. And I want to make sure that when that happens, that we're able to take our families together, because I actually want to take my family back as well. But what are you looking forward to, when we get there?
Man, it's been 4 years at least since you guys went. And when y'all came back, I can say this honestly, y'all were different. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I didn't have the ends to go. So, but I have met probably 10 to 12 people who are from Ghana specifically. And nobody says anything far removed from you're going to be changed. But here's how I got and this is in Mongolia, actually. The inspiration was, there was a lady who was on a bus with us. She was from Africa. And she said to me, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Oh, I'm from, I'm a proud South Carolina." I said, "From South Carolina, I'm from Columbia." I said, "It's kind of like Southeastern." And I was going through the whole thing. She said, No. That's where you were born. She said, "Where are you from?" And it was the first time we were together, posed with that question. So she said, "You're from Ghana, based on your features and all this kind of stuff." So I don't know. I forgot what year that was with Mongolia, but it stayed with me. And so it has intrigued me for some time now. And I've met people from Ghana, and a couple of them, Akuya being one, who say, I think you are. So to now go and experience it for myself, to reconnect, there's several things I have no idea what they are, but experiences that you've talked about. The door of no return, I think it's the last bath or the first bath. All of those things I really want to do, and I want to be able to quiet myself from everything that we do every day, to just take in the fact of kind of where our people, whether it's Ghana or some other part of Africa, where we come from. So I really want this to be not just work, which we're going to do some amazing things, but I really want to just slow my mind, my body down to embrace where we come from, our roots. So that's part of it. Outside of that, you'll be there. I'm really excited about that. But the food, I want to dispel a bunch of myths that we've been taught over the years about Africa, because nobody that's gone to Ghana talks about anything outside of, this is like New York City in many respects, or a major city. So
I'm excited. We're gonna, we're gonna chronicle the mess out of this thing. By the time I get back, we're gonna have a documentary between the two of us.
I want to
just to kind of talk about that. As we get towards the end, I did want to, because I'm obviously going to have you back to talk about some other things. And I know that there are things that people kind of want to hear from the two of us as it relates to the field of work. But as you're out there now, because our careers have kind of come, I'm not going to say full circle, because I don't know what God's full circle is for us. But I know that we're in a different part of the circle right now. And the part of the circle that Patrick and I are in right now is in this direct service piece of the circle, and that is working directly with dads on the ground. Like him and I have done the TA stuff, the conference stuff, that we've been there, we've done that. And I've resisted, and he knows I've resisted doing direct service again, because I've been there, done that, and now I'm here. And now I'm here, and now I'm caught up here. Like I love being here. Like, out of your 20-year experience, like, what is changing in how you think about fathers now that you're working with them directly on the ground than your philosophy about them in the 20 years prior from today?
That's another great question, man. I think what I have learned, and I try to impart to people when I'm doing trainings or just in my regular life, is how important words are to men. So I didn't know this as much, but and I didn't say this, but like throughout my years with and without my father, I've gone through counseling, and I've done therapy, and I've done marriage counseling. And none of it's been, not none of it, some of it's been just to like tune up, but some I've needed. Like I was about to break. I was stressed. I was overwhelmed. And so those things have helped me. But in those experiences, but also in just getting more comfortable in my journey, I have learned how important it is to say things to men like, "I see you, brother," or "Good job, homie," or "I love you." So maybe 10, 15 years ago, I would have been trying to create a bang up flyer, and we'd have had a whole room full of snacks And that's good. But a lot of brothers want to be connected genuinely to men who care to people. But in this case, what guys have said about me that I'm grateful for is, brother, I appreciate you. And every time I talk with you, you have a good word. Or that you acknowledge I'm trying. You know, so I have found that when I meet men, and we've been in prisons together doing work, Kenny, with no batons, nobody got a gun. All you have is really yourself. And I've tried to lend my story just so brothers can feel like they are not the only one. And I've tried to lend encouragement to brothers. And so that I didn't know, but I think that comes with time. That comes with time.
Where are we going to be in 5 years?
Well, I won't have any kids in the house.
Me, you both.
Won't either, right?
Me, you. Well, I'll be just on the cusp of getting rid of the last one, but there'll be no kids in the house.
Yeah. I think I'll still be doing something tied to this. I don't think people have asked me and I've tried to do other things. This is the base of all I do, but I think I'll still be helping people. You'll be helping people, but it may not be in a direct service capacity. The stage that we're going to be on next, you nor I know what it is, but it'll be in a helping capacity. It won't be small scale. I think it'll be large scale.
So, last question. So both of us are authors, and I'm so proud of Patrick because he has 2 children's books. We talked about that in his bio, 2 books that he published with his daughters to help in this work and really amplify the presence of fathers in the lives of their children. But what Patrick hasn't written yet, which is where I want to see him in the next 5 years, and I have 1, if not 2 books that I also need to write, is your biography. Like, I know it's easy to write the children's book, but I can tell you when I wrote my first book, When the Tear Won't Fall, what that book has become for me is the answer to any question my kids have about me prior to being born. Everything is in there. Like there ain't nothing nobody can tell them about me and about what I think that's not in my book. And so it's in that book. And my goal now is to write the second, I say second half of my life, but this chapter of my life, which is when I started doing this work up until now. So that they will also have in their possession my frame of thought and how I've functioned through these last 20 years of doing this work and what that looked like. Is that something on their radar? Is that something you're thinking about doing?
I think I might have shared this with you before, but I had started doing it. My dad died in 2015, and I had 2 titles. One was You Did It, which is a phrase that my dad said to me when I graduated college. You know, he was not in the best shape of mind, but he was at my graduation. You know, and he said, boy, you did it. And I was thinking, this man could have been anywhere. And the graduation is not like an all day. It's a certain time he was there. So You Did It was one. And then the other title that I have written a little bit about is called Successfully Alone. And it speaks about my journey, because as I went from the neighborhood to DC and all the places we've been, I have a lot of friends, but I lost a lot of friends too, because people said, you're switching up on us. You know what I mean? And there were periods of loneliness in my journey because I would want to call and celebrate, like, yo, guess what happened? I just got this contract. And then you realize, like, hello, are you there? You're waiting on my man, good job. Man, I got to run. And so there were parts of my journey that I was writing about, just that path. And people say it's lonely at the top. I don't ever want to feel like I'm at the top, but in my journey to being who I am today, I've lost some people that I'm like, I didn't even talk to this person. I don't know why he's not talking to me? Like, what happened? But I have grown comfortable, and thanks again to my wife, realizing that what God has for you is for you. And you can't worry about the people who are actually trying to pull you down.
Right.
But those two titles have been two that I played with. You did it, and successfully alone.
Well, this is a book that and I got to find your copy. I got to get you this book. This is one. I'm actually interviewing this guy tomorrow.
Wow.
The High Cost of Men's Success, Lonely at the Top.
Yeah.
And so it is crazy because this book is no longer in print, but I was able to find it on Amazon. And the book actually came from the Queen's Library in New York. Wow. And so I'm going to find you a copy of this book. I have not started reading it yet. And it's actually not even when I'm interviewing him on tomorrow. I'm actually interviewing him on his newest book, which is Why People Die by Suicide. And so it's one of those things, given this work and the mental health of our fathers and particularly Black men in this country right now, that we need to have a deeper conversation about. Well, Patrick, give everybody the whens and wheres and how they can get in touch with you and follow you and stay connected and all of that good stuff.
Well, before I do that, let me just say thank you, KB, for the opportunity to share, man. I love you. I appreciate you for all that you've done for me and for all the people that you've touched, man. It's been a great ride. Anything that I've been successful at these last 12, 13 years, you've had a hand in. So I want to publicly say I appreciate you, man. But it means a lot. It means a lot to me. So website is globalpartnersff.com. And on Instagram, Patrick Pat 803, Patrick Pat with one T, 803. And on Facebook, it's just Patrick Patterson. You'll see me on Facebook.
Cool. Thank you so much. And I love you as well. And, my thing with you is more than me saying it to you, I hope that I demonstrate it in your life. In each of our encounters and in each of my thoughts. That's how I like to show up. I like to show up by, as the great Wizard of Oz says, doer of good deeds. That's what he said. You're a doer of good deeds. That's kind of who I am. I just want to do good deeds. I just want to be able to show up in people's lives the way God intends me to show up in people's lives. But I'm glad that each and every one of you have also shown up for I Am Dad podcast. I really, really appreciate each and every one of you. Patrick will be back. We got so much stuff to talk about. So he's going to be back, and I might even have to call him in on being a guest host every now and then. There's a bunch of people that, I want to get in and have these conversations. This is going to be part of my legacy, to be able to leave behind the voices of the field and the voices that are part of this field. And I want to make sure that all those voices are included right here. So thank you so much for joining I Am Dad podcast. You can find all of the past episodes on iamdadpodcast.com, as well as going on YouTube to our I Am Dad channel. We do both the podcast version that shows up on all of the favorite platforms, as well as this YouTube version, because there's some people that like the visuals and not the audible. So make sure that you share it, share your comments, and have a great weekend. I'll see you next Sunday.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting iamdadpodcast.com. That's iamdadpodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am Dad, period.